Vin Diesel's Wheelman is a game I recall actually very vividly back when it released. This was one I played the demo for before launch, and while I thought I covered it for the channel back in the day, I actually can't find any videos. In fact, the only reference, or rather gameplay, I ever did of this game was me using it as a test to see on live streaming service and what that was about. So I'm sure only 3 of you actually remember what OnLive used to be, but otherwise, this is actually my second attempt at playing the full game. I did actually get this game around release. In fact, I think it was a few months afterwards. And even though I didn't do a review, I actually recall quitting on the game almost immediately after playing it. Judging from my previous achievements unlocked during that time, it seems that I only lasted a few hours before dropping the game entirely. And, well, only recently here, more than 15 years on from its initial release, I have yet returned and have fully completed Wheelman. And I went into this game, today with an open mind like I always do. And, this time having the broader advantage of replaying all the games in my collection up to this point, as well as just having generally more patience and a better interest in sort of the art and development of game creation. I was kind of interested to see how this was going to affect my second attempt almost 2 decades later of playing this game Wheelman here. Well, I have to say, Wheelman here isn't great. It's not awful or bad. It just sort of sits somewhere in between. And the main problem I have with the game is it just seems to be very formulaic. Like there's almost nothing new brought to the table with this entry. There are some fun creative decisions, though, surrounding the structure of how this game works and in fact, where it takes place and stuff like that. But for me, Wheelman's largest issue is that it tries to do like too many things at once and doesn't really succeed at being good at either one of those things. That being said, there are some good ideas in here, including one feature that actually is influential. And I'm going to break down all of that for you guys in this video right now. So let's get started. Now, I recall that Wheelman was originally supposed to be a movie tie-in game. Now, whether the game was to act as a sequel or prequel or just simply like a gamified version of the movie, I don't really know. I don't think it's ever been revealed. But originally, Wheelman was supposed to have a film which released alongside a video game. And soon thereafter, the film was actually canceled, and I believe it had something to do with the similarities between, Vin Diesel starring in the Fast and Furious franchise, and already, featuring a genre of, basically heist racing films. And this just didn't really, diversify itself enough from that general franchise. But in any case, you're essentially an undercover CIA operative here. You're sent into a different country to try and track down this gang syndicate, and you act as a getaway driver, hence the Wheelman name, working for various low-level thugs, and you're sort of increasing your rep and earning the right to basically have sit-downs with these bosses, sort of moving up the food chain, so you can get closer and closer to the essential kingpin of this crime family. It's all stuff you sort of seen before. The characters in this one aren't great. They aren't well developed. Vin Diesel is more or less playing himself here, but I have to say, man, his performance is just not quite there. It almost feels like he kind of woke up from a long nap and kind of forgot he had to record lines for this game that day, so he kind of rushed over to the studio and just got to work in a hurry. It doesn't really help either that they sort of enhance his voice in the background with like this extra bass and thump, so he doesn't really sound all that natural when he speaks. And, no matter what scenario he's in, his delivery of the lines is just, it feels emotionally disconnected from what's really happening on screen. We'll talk a bit more about this in the audio section, but let's return to the main narrative here. This is a cliche plot with cliche forgettable characters, and it does at least have some fun action though. This game really feels like a B movie, like one of those early to mid 2000s action flicks that was trying to be super cool and edgy and kind of retaining that kind kind of college level enthusiasm. So I think having it on screen here, watching this unfold, you're somewhat entertained, at least watching this all happen. But you'd be hard pressed to really care or remember anything after you've played it. Changing gears for a quick moment to take a look at the Wheelman box art on Xbox 360. I actually do like the cover art for this one. It's nice and bright, which is pretty cool, and I do like the the logo and all that stuff. On the back here, we got a couple of different screenshots showing basically the action-oriented gameplay, some third-person, cover shooting and all that stuff, kind of selling you that it's this open-world game. Opening it up inside, we have a really well put together package here. Taking a look at the game disc first, it's nice and clean, kind of basic and stuff like that, but you got some burgundy, coloring and stuff. And the manual here is pretty decent. It is black and white, but you do get a nice number of pages here, and there's just tons of details about the controls, the world, the characters, and all this stuff. It's a bit surprising to see this much effort put into a manual for a game of this caliber. Usually, we don't really see that, but I gotta give them some remarks for that. They did a good job putting all this together. Nice ad for Zippo lighters there, and then Tom Clancy's Hawks on the back. Now we're not done. We also get a full foldable map of the actual game world here for Barcelona. And it's all in color, and then on the back we got some cool additional information, which I'll show you guys in a bit. But this is a good size. This is the type of size we would typically see with like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. They also include a map, and they got all the different landmarks there and just all the information, all the roads and stuff. It's not something that you would consult with while playing, but again, I gotta commend them. They put a foldable map in here, and that's a lot more than you would typically get with other games of this style. And then, we get some more stuff on the back and stuff like that. Mostly it's just another detail about the map, but with a bunch of different gameplay elements and challenges and stuff on there. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, good job with the Vin Diesel Wheelman box art. I think they did a great job putting this together. Now, visually, we have yet another mixed bag experience here, I'm sorry to say. I have to say, environment-wise, I think they did a good job here. This game, thankfully, takes place in a very different locale compared to other games. It's Barcelona, Spain. And the developers use this location to just bring very bright, vivid colors and detail to the environment. And I think it just sort of leaps off at you from screen. And as you continue to play, the map sort of expands and you get these nice beach fronts and more business-centric designs. And all this just sort of comes together to create something that's, kind of nice to actually be in. It makes for a fun playground, and visually you will enjoy seeing this game, being that it is a more brighter, more vibrant, and especially more colorful, world, considering that this was the era where many devs kind of used to use what a lot of people like to call like the piss filter. That's not really evident at all throughout this experience, but besides good art direction, I have to say that the actual texture detail is very subpar. The lighting detail isn't that great either. Environments can sometimes feel barren, and they at least populate the streets with traffic and some civilians, but many times you'll crash through a mall or a restaurant and there's just no one in sight. It sort of breaks the immersion when this happens. It doesn't help either that character models here are just really where the visuals fall apart. These people are downright hideous. I'm sorry, but these are just some of the most ugly characters I've seen from this particular era, especially considering this is 2009 when this game came out, and we already sort of got out of the cross-generation, graphical period between 6th gen and 7th gen. So games were fully targeting the new generation of systems. We've seen visuals that look really good on both consoles. But character models here look absolutely a generation behind. Vin Diesel himself looks fine. They got his likeness, and he generally looks okay. But I mean, considering that in the next month, a new Riddick game would have come out after this, and you can just see visually how much more that game does with everything, including character models. I mean, it just really, it just really makes everything here just look all the more terrible. None of the characters here look particularly right. They fail at delivering any nuanced emotions or just really any perceivable ones, and you're just left wondering if this was a game that was conceptually in development around the original Xbox and PS2 days, because some of these people, man, regardless of this, I can say that Wheelman looks solid enough. It's got this vibrant environment, you just don't look too hard at the people that are inhabiting it. Now, musically, there's not really much I can really say here. Generic European Music 101 is playing throughout the entire runtime of this game. None of the music makes a point to really stand out, and it's sort of just there. It's kind of uninspiring in that respect. And as I said before, voice work is sort of all over the place. I know Diesel can do better voice acting than this. You can hear it in games like the Riddick series, and you can see it in his films, but something happened here. He doesn't bring any of his talent to this role. It feels phoned in, it sounds off, and his delivery is either abrupt, too slow, or just too soft. And this is compounded with the enhancements made to his voiceover that kind of sell you this tough guy attitude, but just do so just in a very unconvincing way. I mean, it's him speaking, right? You can hear his voice there, but I know he can do so much better than this. And some of the other characters, they aren't quite as bad, but again, no one is really memorable here. Perhaps if we did see a movie, though, and that actually came to fruition, some of these characters could have been brought to life much closer, because, there's really more of a performance when it comes to that. But overall, the voice work, I have to say, is pretty sloppy. And the rest of the audio package is just sort of your standard fare. Guns kind of sound too low, they lack impact, cars can sound lacking in real personality and depth, and the rest kind of comes together disjointed and just, well, average. Now, finally, I want to break down some of the gameplay elements of Wheelman. I said earlier that Wheelman is a somewhat influential game, and if it wasn't for this one feature, this game would perhaps be completely forgotten about, but Wheelman did give the industry one thing, and that's airjacking. The method of jumping from car to car, hijacking vehicles while they are in motion, came first from this game. This was a system later adopted by the likes of much more critically and better created open world games. Sleeping Dogs is one that kind of comes to mind. But here in Wheelman, this was the first one to have had this feature. They also have these cool slow motion kind of like epic sequences where the camera pulls into the cockpit and you have to shoot the tires and the drivers of other enemy vehicles and kind of get them out of your way. It's all ridiculous. It makes no sense physically, but it's here, it is fun, and it's an addicting gameplay loop that at least keeps you invested for probably more time than this game's actually worth. As I also said before, this game is sort of an open world structure, but this is more of a Mafia style world where there's very little sort of activities to do in this world. So don't think this is like Grand Theft Auto or anything if you played it. You have side content and challenges, but this is typically just a straightforward single player title with the world more or less acting as a playground or a canvas, really, to kind of simply create chaos within. You also have these third-person cover shooting gameplay moments. You actually get out of your car and you can occasionally go and shoot your way through enemy compounds and other gangs. It's sort of designed to break up the monotony of the driving, but the gameplay here, again, the gunplay is just very floaty and imprecise. The controls are all over the place, and it's actually very easy to get through these sections. You can just basically beat these entire areas without taking cover at all, just kind of slowly walking around corners and firing at the heads of all the enemies, and they just die instantly. There are some set pieces in here where they do kind of mesh the two. You'll have driving sections, you'll get out, you'll have shooting, then you'll get back in your car, you'll be airjacking and stuff like that. When it all kind of throws everything at you, it's like, oh yeah, this can be really engaging, but what will happen is you'll likely get frustrated by the controls before you actually find the fun in doing all of this. At least that's where the game left me many times. So I think, if I was going to summarize everything here, Wheelman feels like a game that was given very little attention, perhaps developed by an inexperienced team, and probably was a game that people had high hopes and expectations to really become a brand or perhaps a franchise, but was just fumbled so poorly, and it didn't do enough to sort of separate itself from the competition out there. And perhaps it's really why the movie was canceled in the first place. You know, we got this game, which was likely in development long before the actual film, and you know, it was kind of just shoved out there when it was complete, considering that the film plans got canceled. I do want to mention again that I did end up actually completing Wheelman on my second attempt here, so I did play the entire game through. It took me about 10 hours, just sort of focusing on the main story. I didn't really do a lot of the side content here. And I'm just sad to say that overall I recall being more frustrated than having fun with this game. Or rather, the fun was just very fleeting in those moments. You know, looking back on it now, I can say that there are parts of it that just feel like they had potential, but the execution there was just very, very sloppy. In any case, I'm glad to have at least seen it through this time, which I didn't get to do back during this game's launch. And finally, of course, you know, making some type of review or video content on it. That was great to do. But let me know if you guys played this one and what you guys thought about it. And other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and thank you very much for watching.